Yeah, g'day everyone, and welcome back to the TryPod Live with Winnie and Clarkey. We're here for our Round 8 NRL recap, where we will review each game, recap how Winnie's best bets went, and interact with you all throughout. So we are live now on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and we will see all your comments as they roll in. So please feel free to get involved with the show. Winnie, with that out of the way, welcome to yourself to the show. How has your weekend been, and how were the best bets?
Yeah, never have a great weekend when I don't have a winning record on best bets. We should say again, it was Anzac round, so we pay our respect to former and current servicemen and women, which includes yourself, mate. And there were some great games of footy. It's just a frustrating one for me. Obviously, I was in a rut going into the round. Got a great start with the Roosters. You can't ask for much more than a team winning by 40 plus and putting on 60, but just didn't have any joy after that. And I do feel hard done by. Like, to come into that round 1 and 2, when you got the Roosters, I don't think I'm going to hear much argument that we had the right side there. You take Parramatta, like you hold your nose and take them. I really feel like that they have every chance to maybe win the game. They have more tries than Manly would tend to go, and there's a moment of insanity and it blows us out of the water there. And then even the West game left me frustrated, but if you want to say, yet again, I got it wrong going against Brisbane, I'll cop that on the chin. And on top of that, it tied into the mixed matchup, which it's my fault. I decided not to take any of the Thursday games for the mixed matchup. My best play of the weekend would have been Roosters, but not using that. And the next two best bets lost, so the mixed matchup lost and didn't win a same game this weekend either. So slim pickings and hurting again.
That's all right, mate. We'll go through game by game. We'll speak about them more in depth as we get to them. Of course, on YouTube, Colt's in the house. He's always here. We appreciate you, Colt. Jeremy's here on Facebook, and there's plenty of Instagram comments scrolling in as well. So please continue to get involved with the show. Let's go.
But I might actually pose a question to you and our followers. Appreciate everyone who's in the house. My question to you is, I feel like after 8 rounds, we're seeing a bit of separation there, and watching what Cronulla just did to Canberra, which we'll get to last. You look at the ladder right now. Cronulla, Melbourne, Penrith, Brisbane. Like, that is a clear top 4, and it's hard. My question would be, do you see any of those sides finishing outside the top 4 at the end of the year? There's obviously a long way to go. There are a couple other very strong footy teams currently outside, but it's going to be hard to kind of push any of those 4 out based on what we've seen after 2 months. So I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm also interested in what our followers think in the comments.
Yeah, very interested to see how our followers see that. I think for me, with what we've seen from those 4 teams, it would come down to injuries or suspensions. And so if I had to pick one, I'm probably looking at the Broncos at this stage, just because their captain and their leader, Adam Reynolds, has been in and out throughout the start of the first 8 rounds. Now, that's no indication or suggestion that injury run will continue, but purely if I had to make a pick right now, I'd say Broncos are probably the most likely to fall out of that top 4, although when he is there, they look absolutely superb. So really tough question.
And to put you on the spot even further, is there a team on the outside? Like, who's the team on the outside that you would suggest could take one of those spots?
I'm still looking at the Roosters. I still think their lineup is absolutely stacked, and what they have, which a lot of other teams don't have to their standard, is depth. If the Roosters have a few injuries, you can still trust them. Even if their captain goes down and James Tedesco, you've got a Joseph Manu coming in there at fullback. So they are stacked across the park, but plenty of depth. So the Roosters, if they can continue to put it together like they did against the Dragons, there's no reason why they can't finish top 4 either.
And as a surprise to nobody, I would agree. The Roosters are the side who might only be like 8th, but they're a lot better than 4 and 4. John says Manly and the Roosters, so respect Manly. They're coming 5th. They're not a top 4 side to me. I think they've had a fair share of fortune, but still a good footy team. And we'll talk about the things Manly did well on Friday, because I hate to seem like I'm negging them or detracting from them every week, but I do think they've had those narrow victories. They still count the same for 2 competition points in any case. So not my choice to push into the 4, but it is interesting to kind of see that at this point the competition is starting to shake out a little bit, and we're starting to work out who's real versus who might have just had a good spell of 2 to 3 weeks.
Absolutely. Plenty of Dogs fans here on Instagram. Anthony and Elijah both say Bulldogs are the team that could slide into the top four. I can't agree there, but doggies are certainly traveling very well. All right, let's jump into the round. We'll go to Thursday afternoon. We opened it up at Go Media Stadium where the Titans defeated the Warriors 27 points to 24. Warriors were widely regarded as favourites in this. You can see the line there instead of the score. It was minus 11.5 towards the Warriors, but unbelievable win for the Titans. Like, genuinely unbelievable. I didn't have the faith that we could continue to replicate that effort and that desire. We did, and it was just an amazing feeling there at full time. A feeling that's just been far too long there as a Titans fan. But for the Warriors, it's kind of to the point now where we start to wonder what's wrong. Because when they lost to the Dragons last week, I said, look, I'm not concerned about their credentials in September. Still think they'll be up around that top 4, definitely top 8. But their last 3 is now reading loss, and a draw. Of course, we go back to their last win, which is the Rabbitohs, and we know that they are struggling this year. So watching this one, it felt like the Titans out-enthused them, but then the Titans did make more tackles. They had less run meters and less post-contact meters. But when I say out-enthused, it was more of a hunger and a desire. So they were very good in the areas of goal line defense, in my opinion, and set completions, where they're up at 92%. That is the highest the Titans have finished in a very long time, definitely this year. So they were fantastic. Meanwhile, we do have some question marks that grow over the Warriors for me. Would you agree with that, Winnie? And how do you see this one?
Well, didn't I tell everyone before the season, like, the Titans can beat a top 4 team? That's what I said. The Titans can beat someone that came top 4 last year. And some people might have got their wires crossed and thought I said Titans top 4 at 11s was a good bet. But there you go. This is the Titans team a little bit closer to what I was looking for, because I will say what I said on Tuesday. I'll say it again. The Titans should have won the last 2 games. They should have won in Canberra, and they actually should have beaten Manly as well. And they got their just deserved. And I thought you were going to lose it in heartbreaking fashion. Like, let's not forget, your captain, he's pretty close to your best player as well, is out since round 3. You go over there without Jaden Campbell, and you're down 12-0 early, and that line, I think, had only gone one direction. It was like 13.5 by kickoff Thursday afternoon, first ever home Anzac Day game for New Zealand. There were so many reasons why the Warriors could run up a score, but from 12-0 down, you have then scored the next 27 points in the game, quite unreal. And I thought at that point you'd won, so I've gone from this is going to be a long afternoon for Clarkey, and shout out Tristan, actually travelled over to Auckland, was at the game. I'm thinking, oh yeah, it could be a tough one, because you need to start well. And then the Titans get themselves back in the game. But when you ran in those tries in the second half, and there was a disallowed try by the Warriors that was a bit 50-50 where the ball went up. I think it was Rocco Berry contesting it, and they said that the bat down was forwards. They took the try off New Zealand, and then the Titans actually went and scored the other end. So it was like a 10, 12-point swing. And I thought that you'd done enough to win. It was 27-12 at that point. But New Zealand fought back, and goal kicking I thought could come back to burn you, because New Zealand scores 2 straight converted tries. They're within 3. There's still a good, long 15 minutes to go. It must have felt like 150 minutes to you, Clarkey, as the Titans just hung on. And I thought, New Zealand's going to win the game by 1 or 3 points. And Tanner Boyd missed 3 conversions, and New Zealand didn't miss a kick a goal, So you're lucky that, well, it's not really luck, because it was incredible grit and determination to cling on for dear life, just like they showed in Canberra, where they got no rewards from it. And not so much last week where they let in 34 to Manly, but the final, I think, 25 minutes of that game was scoreless. So there was the desire is there. The toughness there is finally showing in this team. Where it was in the first couple of rounds, I don't know. But you absolutely deserved it. That's what I can say about the Titans. And as for New Zealand, absolutely question marks now, because they've been over a converted try favourite 3 weeks in a row for no wins. And I know it's still early in the season. They don't want to panic, but the defence is the issue for New Zealand. Like last year, they wouldn't have let teams run in 5 tries against them, and it was 6 or 7 last week by St. George, and at least 5 by Manly or at least 4 or 5 by Manly the week before that. So New Zealand's defense, I think, is the biggest issue that's missing, because their attack allowed them to possibly make inroads and make you very nervous, but they ultimately let you get too many points in front.
And that's a big issue for the Warriors, because when they're at their best, their defense is fantastic. But I do love the comment you just brought up. El Duda there from YouTube. He says Sean Johnson is having confidence issues. Attack timing was off last week, and now the whole team is off this week. Everything revolves around Sean Johnson. So when he has an off night, the Warriors have an off night, particularly without his usual halves partner there in Metcalf. So tough go for the Warriors there. And
he may be carrying something too, as an observation. And there were rumors about that, isn't there?
So he's carrying a calf injury, I believe it is. And Andrew Webster has said it's not a matter of when, it's if, it's when we rest him. So he does need to have a game off to let it settle, but it's just when.
And it was evident that he was slightly hampered in this game as well.
Certainly, look, if I'm the Warriors, I'm getting him off the field ASAP, and I'm looking to things later down the track, giving another young half an opportunity here, or going to our depth, making sure our star man is well rested and as fit as can be in what could be his final NRL season. Alrighty, game 2. It was the Roosters beating the Dragons 60-18 at Allianz Stadium. This was a really interesting one for us, because in the preview show, I sort of said, I don't mind the Dragons with a bit of a head start. I wish it was a bit more. And you were just straight down the line. Hey, Roosters are going to come back here. And after your analysis, I firmly believed in you, and I thought the Roosters would really perform here. And disappointing for Dragons fans. I mean, genuinely, if they won this game, we're looking at their last 5 and we're saying, is this a top 8 side under Shane Flanagan? Instead, all the hard work they did in 3 of their last 4 getting wins there is absolutely undone. It's absolutely butchered, because they've just gone and conceded 60 points, and that's just not acceptable from an NRL side. And how they performed in this game, to me, it summed up why so many people had them in their bottom 4 predictions this year, and the inconsistency at which they play out this season. It makes them a tough side to ever feel confident when you're betting on or against, because they've looked brilliant at times and they've looked absolutely horrible. Fortunate for us with the best bet in this one that we got the horrible Dragons side. For the Roosters, I thought they were essentially flawless. They looked an entirely different team with Sam Walker there. He controlled everything perfectly. But another key factor for me was actually Joey Manu, and how the Roosters got him involved almost as a second fullback. We've seen it work for teams in the past, such as the Blues in Origin, where Tom Trbojevic, the right centre, which Manu is typically, plays a second fullback role. He's given a license to roam across the field. Joey Manu had about double the meters from last round. He had more try involvements, and playing right centre, he actually scored a try on the left wing. So I think that really summed up. He had a license to go anywhere he wanted. He was really active, and it was just great signs for the Roosters all round in this one. How did you see it, though?
To discuss St. George first, I think inconsistency is the word. You said it there. Like, they're not a top 8 side for me, but the competition is great and it's close, and teams outside the 8 can still mix it with sides that are a bit better than them here and there, and can beat teams that are finals caliber, but you don't get to do it consistently. You look at a team like West, who could beat Cronulla, but Cronulla's looked unbeatable the last few weeks. But you can't just say, okay, boys, that's how we played this week. Now that's the standard that we expect every week. It just doesn't go like that. So the Dragons, I feel like their ceiling, is still a few rungs below the true contending sides. So when they meet a strong side that's on, they can't go with them. But if they meet a team that's kind of off their game, or if they meet an average team, they can drag them into the mud, and they will get their fair share of ugly wins this year when they catch teams off their game. But it was an important game to the Roosters because of the occasion, but also because you can't muck around. You're coming into the game with a losing record, and the Roosters have so much more talent than a 3-4 team. And you could see they were switched on, even though they did give up the opening try, but then put on 30 straight before halftime. And that's despite the fact we lost Radley pre-game. Now, that is a bit unlucky, but in saying that, the Dragons lost Moses Sully first play in, and it's even tougher to cover an outside back when you lose them once the game started. Connor Watson did perfectly fine at lock, to be fair. And I think both sides lost a winger pre-game too, because Ravalawa and Daniel Tupou were both unavailable, so they both had to shuffle the back line. So it goes both ways. But finally, the Roosters kind of putting together what I've felt they've been capable for the whole season.
Yeah, absolutely. My
And
prediction.
Sam Walker being back set, like he is one of the elite sevens in the competition. And, we lost him to a head knock very early 2 or 3 weeks ago against the Dogs, when I had a best bet on him too. And who really knows how differently that game could have gone? Because obviously Roosters got such a bad start and still nearly won with 11 on the field. But the Roosters have struggled a little bit since Walker's been out, and you do see what an immense difference to their attack it makes when he's back in there playing his best.
When he's playing his best, it's crazy to think the Roosters dropped him last year. My pick for this game was Daniel Tupou to score 2 tries. Of course, ruled out pre-game, but when you're scoring 60, I think my tip might have been a bit of a go there. Tupou's usually in and around at 60 points. He would have had some opportunities. But
because who was on the wing? They slotted Swali, ended up on the wing and did score because Jennings came back into the team. Yes. But then at one point, Jennings got an elbow injury. So I can't remember if Swali may have been I think he essentially was the left winger, and he did score at last or second last try. So fair to say you would have had a fair shot there.
We were a sniff if he did play. I think it's worth noting as well before we move on to game 3, we actually haven't had a best bet this year where players from the team we're opposing have withdrawn late of significance. But there's certainly been a lot of games that we've offered as a best bet on this podcast. And then we've had key players ruled out. Radley was the one this round, and you could add Tupou to that as well. But previously there's been, I want to say at least 3 or 4 other instances.
Again, I don't want to whinge, but it would be a funny exercise to actually write up an all-star team with players that have been pulled out of teams I've had a best bet on. You would be close to all-star level. So, but as I said, Dragons did lose Ravalawa, losing Sully first, second, very unlucky. And it doesn't really matter who played or who didn't, because this game, in reflection, was never competitive.
Yeah, hopefully Moses Sully is okay. When he got knocked out off the kickoff there, part of me was, or most of me was like, oh, that is so unfortunate on such a big day. But then the inner sort of bogan footy fan was like, oh, that's prime rugby league. Not that we like to see anyone injured, but just big collisions off the kickoff. It just sums up the brutality of our sport, doesn't it? It's
sure, but as much as we love it, and this is a whole different conversation, so I won't have it, but there's been too many players knocked out off the first tackle of the game. And didn't we all love the shoulder charge? I did. I was really disappointed when they took it out of the game, because the shoulder charge done well is not unsafe, and it's spectacular. But done when it goes wrong, it's dangerous. So we took it out of the game. Well, these kickoffs, these high-speed impacts, collisions, I think back to Cam Murray. Didn't he get knocked out in the very first play of the decider a couple of years ago? And there's been a few this year too. You actually do feel like a rule change may be imminent. So as much as we love the early exchanges in games, I guess enjoy it while they're still part of the game. I can't really see, we're in the age of concussion knowledge, that it's going to be allowed to play out the same way for much longer.
Mate, I completely agree, as unfortunate as it is. Jai Saga from Instagram says AFL is better. Mate, you have come to the wrong show tonight. And whilst we're happy to have you, you're going to be bitterly disappointed, as we're not going to chat any AFL here at all. Let's move on to game 3. The Storm beat the South Sydney Rabbitohs 54-20 at Amy Park. They extend their dominance at that ground. I think the question coming into this one was, can Souths get any worse? Because I know I certainly messaged you early this week and said, is there a bit of value about that line, given Storm's thin winning margins so far this year? But coming off a bye, you didn't think Rabbitohs could look worse, but they almost did. And their roster is still relatively strong. It's nowhere near at full strength because of the injury toll they have, but they still have a strong roster with players there that are at a rep level, or at least former rep level with some experience. What makes this game worse for the Rabbitohs was it wasn't their young, inexperienced players that botched it for them. It was actually key senior figures that just ruined the momentum they captured. I think to the first half, they had momentum building, and then Cody Walker gives a 7-tackle set away. Storm go down and score at the other end. Momentum gone. Second half, they start to build again, and you think, okay, maybe they are going to cover this line. Jack White tackles Ryan Pappenhausen in the air for no reason. Now, those are 2 senior and influential figures in this side, and if they're not helping manage momentum, then I can tell you the young guys like Peter Mamazellus coming off the bench are no chance. Very, very silly from both men there, and very, very they shot themselves in the foot. I think it's as simple as that. Whereas for the Storm, I mean, we go to their winning margin, and I've spoken about it at length on this podcast. It's only 4 this year. They're not putting sides to the sword. They don't have that killer instinct they've had in previous seasons. I said Cameron Munster looks off. And then he goes and explodes. The Storm win by 34 points and rubbish that stat. That doesn't matter anymore. They send a clear reminder to the league that they are still a top dog in this competition and decimate the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Did you see it that way as well?
And I said on Tuesday, like, Munster hasn't looked himself to me, and he wins the Anzac medal. But I don't think I was wrong. I just think that's kind of actually showing how the Melbourne can unlock an even greater level. When if Munster, because he's dealing with a groin injury, and it obviously was feeling pretty good on Thursday, and he can get back to his elite level, like, this team can tear sides apart. Like, I didn't want to get out in front of Melbourne because you can see their full strength. Like, they've integrated Nelson back. Pappy looks great. You know, remember obviously the terrible injuries he suffered the last couple of seasons, like even when he made his comeback last year, then he did his knee, but he looks like he's one of the form fullbacks in the comp. Grant's playing as well as anyone. Jerome Hughes last week, he was best on ground, and now Munster's kind of regaining his best form. So there's really not many weaknesses. Melbourne's just about impossible to beat at home. So, like, it's a true fortress there. And then Souths have got a lot of, like, kind of what you said, rep or former rep players, but none of them are playing their best, and they're still short a couple as well. So it was always going to be such a tough game for Souths, and they get down early, but actually do fight back. I think they conceded the first couple of tries, but it did cut to 12-10. You're like, all right, there's a bit of fight about Souths. Like, they have come out of the bye and, not a lot to lose, but they're going to serve it up to Melbourne. But I really thought it was lapses in concentration that Souths allowed multiple long-range tries and a blitz of Storm tries, because that score went from like 12-10 to like 34-10, over the end of the first half and into the second half. And then it looked like a big flogging was on. And then there was a little fight back, and Souths actually did score, I think, 2 or 3 in a row. And then the cover was actually in doubt. I think they cut the margin to like 16, 18 points, like within a try of actually covering the line. But ultimately, Melbourne closed them out. So we got that, peculiar scoreline. What a try fest it was on Anzac Day, even going back to Roosters. Because what was the Roosters score? 60 to 18.
Yeah.
60 to 18. Yes. And then then this game was 54-20. So it's like even the sides that were not even close still scored a lot of points. Nearly a point a minute sort of stuff. But there's some little signs of life from Souths. And again, the crazy stat continues. I feel like I'm losing count. Is it 13 or 14 in a row now, regular season games, where they've failed to cover the spread? So we're now talking like a 1 in 8,000 probability if you were rolling that over against Souths, and they didn't get too close this weekend either.
That is absolutely wild, right? Yeah, because the line is designed to create a genuine 50-50 for punter versus bookie. And yeah, I think it's actually 15, man. I swear like we were talking about this in round 4. Oh, no, you're right, because there was the bye for South last week. So yeah, it'd be up to 14 now.
It could be 14.
14 times in a row they've struggled to...
And then like everyone's gone, and it'll be 15 next week because they're playing Penrith. But it's like, yeah, but it doesn't actually matter who they're playing. It's the line. Like, so the line should be like super high. I haven't got it in front of me. But they should have a 50-50 chance on face value of covering next week, whether they're playing Souths or whether they're playing, whether they're playing the Titans. It should be 50-50. But we'll see. Obviously, this is our chance to reflect. I'll start looking ahead from tomorrow.
Spot on, mate. G'day, Dan. Dan's here on Facebook. And we've got a question on Instagram from Will Munro. He says, your thoughts on the Tane Milne tackle? For me, I thought it was an obvious attempt to injure a player. I would have liked to have seen him got more than 2 weeks. But did you see it that way as well?
Yeah, it was really bad. Like, it was total frustration. And the thing is, he knew what he was doing. And, that should be a send-off. But it happened in the 79th minute anyway. But I'm surprised, actually, because he's got a bit of form, Milne. Just don't know how much longer you can carry him in first grade because he's not that great of a player to kind of tolerate the potential brain snaps. But it wasn't the biggest brain snap of the week, fortunately.
I see what you're doing there. That is a perfect segue into our next game. Game 4, Manly beat the Eels 32-18 at 4 Pines Park, Brookvale Oval. And I don't know where to begin on this one from a betting perspective, but certainly as a follower of your best bet, I was so frustrated watching this game. But I do want to leave all of that to you because you did a post that really summed it up well on Facebook and portrayed how unfortunate, I suppose you could say, this was here. Pretty poor game by both sides. It's a win margin that's actually quite high for Manly. I think it flatters them a little bit because they weren't at their best here. And when they are at their best, with how the Eels played, they're capable of winning by more there. We go to the Eels. I liked their offload game. I thought it was dangerous, but their discipline was atrocious. They didn't give themselves a genuine chance. They had 8 errors there and 14 penalties and infringements combined, which is almost double that of Manly. And I just think that if you're going to have poor discipline against Manly, through their experience, headlined by Daly Cherry Evans, they are going to beat you a lot of the times, and they're not. They're very good at capitalizing when you're poor. So Manly were good here without being great. Eels with discipline was atrocious, and that's what let them down. Over to you. We need to put those stats and other information you posted, mate. Let it rip.
You mentioned DCE. Like, let's start there. That was first half. Like, that was sublime. That dummy and then rip snorter cutout ball to Saab that Manly broke away for their first try. Am I remembering that? Or was that early second half? Now that I think about it, I guess that was in the second half if I played out in my mind. But that's kind of the highlight of the game for Manly, and they are a team. What you can say about Manly and why a lot of people didn't like my best bet going in is Manly is the kind of team that can certainly hurt you when you're down, you lose concentration, you don't match the energy level. But they've got weapons. DC pulls the strings, and you know like what Turbo can do. I actually thought Turbo was relatively kept in check in this one. But for me, this one really hurts because I do feel like I had the right side there with 10.5 and Parramatta, who actually led at halftime 3 tries to 1, but it was only 14 points to 6. And that included taking a penalty shot from in front because Gutho, who you mentioned, he's playing busted, right? He's got this knee issue. Look, actually played pretty brave. I can't really knock the effort by Gutho, but is that affecting his prep in terms of like his practicing his goal kicking? Can he not do as much of that because he's managing this knee issue? He misses every conversion, and I'm worried. Like, I've got plus 10.5 and they're up by 8 points. You still feel like you're in a pretty strong position, but you just always worry, is a kick or two, going to come back to hurt you? And Manly, my mistake, I think I said their first try, but I think that DCE play was in the second half that really got Manly back in the game. And Manly hit the front. And there's a few controversial moments. I mentioned the penalty count in my post, not so much to complain that the referees did Parramatta over, but just that they had to overcome a lot of adversity. And look, there was one point in the game where I think Para got a bit lucky too. Like, Manly made a couple of breakaways. DCE uncharacteristically threw a pass well off the mark. There's one where Tommy Turbo makes a line break and the ball sticks to his hand when he's playing it. And I was like, oh, Para are only just clinging on here. But the part that does hurt a lot is when kind of out of the blue, Manly chip and chase, and we subsequently see Turbo was offside. And like, that's an interesting one because there's a chip and chase. And first of all, I would say it's a bad mistake by Penasini to clearly commit a professional foul. He tackles Turbo, who didn't even have the ball, and he's kicking ahead. Like, you've still got to get a bit right to toe ahead for yourself and regather it and score. And there were other players in the picture too. So it's completely unnecessary to tackle Turbo. But it does sting a bit when you look back and Turbo was offside. And the ref did actually call time off and talk to the bunker about that being a professional foul. So I'm curious why the bunker couldn't just tip him off and say it was offside. But the part that really burns is then Para survives that time and actually scores with the man short. And Sivo, had a cracking game, was tested under the high ball, come up with some great grabs, has a hat trick. The man's been in reserve grade for 2 weeks, back in first grade. Like, it's going to be one of the best games of his career. And they survive the period. Penasini, Para cuts the score to 20 to 18, have another kick at goal to actually level it. But again, they missed, and Gutho handed over the kicking duties to Brown. Didn't get any better. But it's anybody's game. Like, Para shuts down Manly's set. It was 5th tackle. Sivo jams in, shuts down Garrick perfectly. And then I can't explain what he did. Like, it's the most blatant. Like, you're trying to hurt him. Did Garrick hurt his feelings earlier in the game? There's just no way you're going to get away with that. You just cannot risk doing anything that could give an opponent a repeat set, like a 7-tackle set or a penalty at that juncture in the game, let alone so blatantly and have a second attempt. It gets yourself sin bin, and it's game over essentially the moment that happens. If it couldn't have been any clearer, Manly scores on Sivo's wing 2 plays later, and then gets another one when Parramatta's backs are pretty much broken. And, there were 9 conversion attempts in this game, Clarkie. Do you know how many went in favour of our best bet?
Well, Para went 0 for 4. Yeah.
Yeah, Para went 0 for 4. But Garrick went 5 for 5. He slots those ones from the sidelines. So, again, it's one of these ones where if you just look at the final score, you say, yeah, I could have predicted that, 32-18. And if you did play Manly, like, I'm not here to tell you got it wrong. Like, you're going to say, oh, I took Manly because I knew that you can't trust Para for 80 minutes. I know Para's, like, mentally weak and then just not as tough this year, and their defense is questionable, and I was proven correct because Manly ran over him at the end. But to me, it's like, with 10 to go, it's anybody's game in terms of who wins. I'm catching 10.5, and I'm just saying, like, we lose the bet because of whatever went on in the mind of Mike Sivo, which I'll never know. And a lot of people, even in the comments, people were saying, like, oh, that's really unlucky. And lots of people consoling me in the group, like, that is bloody unlucky. Even the Padonis, he said, and I'm not sure if Padonis was on Para with us or not, but he said that was the most deserving team to cover this year that didn't cover, right? But what it doesn't protect me from is that that's the difference between a winning best bet round or a losing one. And I still cop it for another losing week, So it's like, his decision affects me because I personally have to answer for why that bet lost in the comments, in my DMs. And I don't enjoy doing that. And it really frustrates me. And I'd love an NRL player out there to lose their mind, sabotage their team, and kill their team's chance of winning or covering the line when I'm against them. But be my guest. But why does it happen only to sink our best bet when we're already in a struggling patch? It just feels pretty cruel, to be honest.
It is unlucky. And, at the end of the day, like, when we look at what the best bet record was at the end of this season, no one's going to remember, that one loss there and remember how unlucky it is. They're just going to see it as a loss. But when you add the context like you just did to it, you can make a pretty good argument as to why it was unlucky. And I think for Mike Sivo, he is the first person in NRL history to score a hat trick, and unanimously have every Eels fan begging for him to be dropped the next week. And I think that sums up the stupidity of his play. You don't need to say anything more on that. Let's move on to Game 5. It was the Broncos defeating the Tigers 34-10 at Campbelltown Sports Stadium. Myself personally, I was hopeful the Tigers would turn up here, particularly for the Campbelltown fans that continue to, show up and show their stripes. And I think it's now 10 losses in a row for the Tigers at the ground there. And in the end, you'd probably say it was a poor showing by the Tigers. Both their tries did come late in this contest when the Broncos had some injuries and the game was realistically already wrapped up. Broncos really good on the road, though. That was a slight question mark on their 2024 credentials, just because most of their best wins had come at Suncorp or in Queensland so far this year. But I think it's at the point now where a lot of people are recognising this side as a genuine contender this year, despite the huge losses from last year and losing Farnworth, Flegler, Capewell, Policia, etc. They're humming along fine. They have key players out and injured, such as Ezra Mam and Selwyn Cobbo, yet they're still performing brilliantly. There's a lot to like about this team at the moment. And even in this game, Winnie, they scored 34 points, but they did it with 68% completion rate, and they gave away double the penalties than what the Tigers did. Now, stats like that will usually really hurt you on the scoreboard. And if it's a tight contest, you go back to those sort of stats and you say, well, that's where we lost it. The fact that they, complete 7 out of 10 sets and give away double the penalties being ill discipline there, and we don't even need to talk about it, really sums up how talent packed they are and how much X factor they have and strike throughout their whole lineup. How did you see this one, though? This one would have been a disappointing one given we had a best bet on the Tigers.
Yeah, and I stand by that bet. That might sound silly, and I know I copped it last night, and people hit like I don't even know where to begin. But one person really was angry about that Campbelltown stat. Like, how could you possibly take the Tigers with the start, knowing they're 0-10 at Campbelltown? And I'm kind of like I already said this in the on Tuesday. Like, they've lost a lot of games everywhere. They've won the last 2 wooden spoons. Like, what are we really suggesting, that they deliberately lose at Campbelltown? Like I don't really see why that proves that the Broncos were going to win big. Like you said on Tuesday, Tigers beat Brisbane outright 4 of the last 5. So wouldn't that prove that the Tigers were going to win? But anyway, whatever the case may be, I'll say it again. Like, I stand by the best bet plus 6.5 for a few reasons. First half, for one, there's not a single bookie in Australia that still had the line at 6.5 when it kicked off. So nobody was letting you on plus $6.5 $1.90, right? They're all at 5.5. So if you disagree with me, not only could you play the 5.5, minus 5.5, you would also be able to win if it landed on 6, which is a very common halftime margin. So people come at me after the game. It's like, you don't need to be angry. Like, if it was so obvious, just take the way better bet that's opposite. And in this case, you'd be happy. But what does kind of hurt me is, look, I'll say I got it wrong because Brisbane won by a big margin, and I thought Tigers would make a better game of it. But the way I played it, playing first half, and if you actually watch the first half, it was so much closer than 16-0. I know how stupid that must sound, but like, West had 3 times the tackles in opponents' 20 than Brisbane did. Like, West were really in that. It was 1 line break apiece at halftime. West more meters, like every opportunity, and somehow they didn't score. Now, I will actually testify that West did score a try. I thought it was a great try by Appy. He goes in a dummy half every time you know he's going to do something, and he still sometimes does it, and that is a marvel to watch. And I hated that call because you could not have had a referee that was better positioned in the history of rugby league than where Atkins was standing, completely unobstructed, watching Appy slam it down one-handed after he gave the defence a little bath and pulled Reece Walsh's pants down. And that try was during a period where Tigers had a man in the sin bin. And why did Tigers have a man in the sin bin? Because Samuela Fayunu didn't know the rule about players catching it in the in goal, or didn't see Oates catching the in goal, and just laid out Oates, who was trotting back to the 20-metre line. So it's like another complete brain fade, another sin bin. And I'm only betting a 40-minute bet. Of course, I lose a back rower for 10 minutes in that period. But Tigers survived the 10, score a try. It's going to be 10-6. It's awarded. And some hero in the bunker looks at it 1,000 times slowed down, sees a ball shift. Like, tell me now, am I salty? Did I get it? Was that no try? Because how can the ref, who could not have a better view, call it a try? Should Atkins be dropped? What if that was a grand final? Like, is the rule wrong? Was the bunker wrong? Or was Atkins wrong? Like, to me, I know that you can't re-grip a ball with one hand, but if there was ever a try where it really did look like he fully got a good grip back on it and had complete control as he planted it, it was that. So again, is it just sour grapes talking for me? Because I do feel like that was a massive kick in the guts for the Tigers, and it was 10-0 with that 6 ripped off the board after 39 and a half minutes. And remember I said, I'm terrified of Reece Walsh, and he came to burn us because he did score the final play of the first half. So it's in a funny way, like, would that have still happened anyway? And would the bet have lost anyway? And look, I don't want to act like I absolutely should have won that. I just think it really was a fair bet. Like, it really was a good contest in the first half. I played again, and I was catching 6.5. And at halftime, the halftime team on Fox was saying, Wests are unlucky not to be leading. You know, you never hear that about a team that's 16-0. They all agreed it was a try, including the commentators. So somebody else who's unbiased, who didn't have best bet on the line in a tough period of the season. You tell me, what did you think? I'm interested in your thoughts as well, Clarkey. But ultimately, I am super impressed by Brisbane. I did think their defense was outstanding. They did continue to turn the Tigers away in the first half, gave West very little until late in the game, and they just know how to hurt you. And it could have been more points for Brisbane as well when you consider Mariner was definitely off as much as he scored an amazing first try, dropped 3 other balls in the first half, including a sitter that would have been a walk-in try. So Brisbane left points on the table. Tell us how you saw it, mate. But also, Reece Walsh, is that injury of any concern? It didn't look good at the very end when he had to go off with I think it was a calf complaint.
Yeah, Kevin Walter said post-game that Reynolds and Walsh were both cramps. Nothing serious there. The only serious injury they had was to Jock Madden's pec, with Ezra Mann still in some doubt to return next round. That would mean they'd play Tristan Saylor at 6, which is still a handy option for him alongside Reynolds there. On the Appy try, I was actually on the opposite in this game. I took Broncos out the line over the full game to cover it. So I was on the opposite to you, and I thought that was a fair try for Appy Coruscant. I don't know why that was taken off him. I think that rule's stupid. If you ground a ball, you ground a ball. It's as simple as that in my view. And the other thing of note was the Samuel Fainu sin bin. I'm guessing he didn't hear the referee call come out to the 20 because it was actually a great tackle. If that was live play, you would have said, wow, he chopped him. But it was just unlucky.
That's what they said. He didn't hear the call, but you probably should have seen it. But if I could probably just jump back in, I guess James Graham says Reynolds was excellent. That's the other key difference between these two sides is that when a Brisbane set ends, it ends with a Reynolds kick. He put up a couple more of those terrifying torpedoes that the Tigers couldn't deal with and let a couple bounce and spilled one or two. Whereas the Tigers' end of sets options were left something to be desired. In particular, that one. Tigers have a good set, roll up the field. They're on the Broncos try line, and Caesar comes up with a head-scratching little chip over the line where there is not a Tiger within QE, and Oates just easily marks the ball. And that leads to, instead of an attacking kick and being able to make something happen for West, it's suddenly a penalty Brisbane and a sin bin, and it completely kills his team. And then Brisbane goes down the other end, and when it's fifth tackle for them, they do a little chip over the top, except the difference is bounces straight into the arms of Jock Madden and he scores. So that's not really me saying that's unlucky, because again, Reynolds did it at the very end of the half for a length of the field try. He kicked over the top. Class players do make the difference in moments like that for sure. And Brisbane have class players in key positions. And I'm well aware. And probably if I could finally touch on the fact that I've lost a best bet against Brisbane, I think 4 straight weeks. And I really feel like I'm happy with probably 3 of those 4. I think taking the Dolphins with a double-digit start, Brisbane scored some crazy tries. Hammer was out early. I can live with that. I think Dolphins have shown enough, although we'll get to today. This game in Campbelltown, even though the record notwithstanding, West catching that many points without Mam and Cobbo, I can actually live with that one. Down in Melbourne with no Reece Walsh, I do feel like Melbourne should have won by more. And you look how good Melbourne are going, I don't regret that one. But probably the Canberra one, because I'm not a big fan of Canberra. I just talked myself into it a little bit with the Reynolds and Haas being out. If I could take a bet back, I wish I could respect Brisbane a bit more, and I wouldn't have played that one. But overall, they've been too good, and I've just got to cop it and accept it. And we'll see, where the line falls next week in terms of which side I'm on in the Brisbane game, if at all.
Oh, 5 weeks in a row now. That would be a very, very brave one there. Daro on YouTube says Renault's intercept with a love heart. That was the most slow motion intercept I've ever seen in rugby league, and it was a thing of beauty. Alrighty, let's move on to Game 6. The Panthers beat the Cowboys 26-20 at Queensland Country Bank Stadium. The Panthers did lose Scotty Sorensen and Moses Leotti here prior to kickoff, and no doubt that really hurt them. They are two important players to their forward pack, and they got a great lead despite that, and they seem to be controlling this contest really well. And all of a sudden, the Cowboys just said, hey, we're a good team in Townsville. We're not in Sydney, and they started to mount a comeback. And unfortunately, they do fall short in that comeback, but Cowboys can still take some confidence from that. It doesn't answer much of my big question mark on them. That is how they play away from home. I think in Townsville, I'm convinced I could tip them and make reasons for them to win against any side on their day at home. But there's only a handful of Sydney teams I'd actually tip them against when traveling at this stage. So still a big question mark over the Cowboys, despite a lot of heart shown in this one. Meanwhile, Panthers will be happy enough to take the 2 points here. They realize they don't need to win every game 50-0. You could say they took their foot off the throat. You could say they were off in Cleary's return. You could say they were off from missing 2 key forwards. Whatever it was, the biggest thing the Panthers will take from this is they take the 2 points, they face the Bunnies next week, and it looks like they should make it 3-0 since their bye, which is obviously brilliant form for a side that expects to contend again this year. How do you see this one though, Winnie?
So the line was -9.5, -10.5, and the Cowboys were probably the closest thing to a best bet I didn't play. And then the way that Penrith started, I was thankful for that. But it's a funny one. It's a game that comes down to the wire. Maybe game of the weekend. You could definitely argue that. Probably the only other one in contention might have been your boys. So give a shout out again to what you did on Thursday, Arvo. But this was a cracking game last night. And it's a funny one because with 5 to go, you didn't know if the Cowboys are going to win up outright or fail to cover the spread and lose by 12. Like, that's how one moment can swing it that much, because Penrith, despite the early omissions, were in total control in this game. I mean, the score was 24-4. Penrith are out by 20 points, and it looks like Penrith are going to romp the Cowboys, and you're really starting to worry about North Queensland. A week ago, they're beat by 40 down in Cronulla. Yes, it's a tough opponent, but you come home and you're getting blown off the park by Penrith, and Cleary looked just great. But to the North Queensland's credit, like, they're stuck in there and they mounted a legit comeback. 3 tries in the space of 12 minutes, cut the score from 24-20 with plenty of time left. And I really thought the Cows were going to run over the top. I thought the Cowboys could get the win. But in the tight moments, the thought did cross my mind, is a team with a Chad Townsend at halfback going to beat a team with Nathan Cleary at halfback when it's all for all the marbles, when it's the game is on the line? And you find that hard to believe. And in those moments, you're looking for that key moment that's going to decide a game. And Penrith, who had defended really well for kind of the first 40, 50 minutes, and I thought our mixed matchup was a chance, because the mixed matchup was West to outscore Cowboys. Cowboys only had 4 points on the board, the first 47 minutes or something. But then obviously that got blown away with the Cowboys comeback. But yeah, North Queensland's on Penrith's line too. Inside the final 10 minutes, only down 4 with all the momentum. Penrith repels them, gets a penalty, lead by 6, and then it would have been a brutal loss if you took the Cowboys line, because Penrith was knocking on the door. You're probably hoping for just a field goal attempt, but Penrith had bigger plans, nearly score, but they don't quite execute. And they hold North Queensland out. So at least you're seeing more signs of life and a bit of resilience if you're a Cowboys fan, whereas it's just job done, isn't it, for Penrith in that one?
Exactly right. The Undertaker on Facebook says Panthers are looking a bit mortal this year. That being said, I give them 0% chance. I give South 0% chance of beating them. So we know the Undertaker's early mail there for next round. Let's move on to the next game. We're on Sunday now. Knights beat the Dolphins at Suncorp 18-14. And my takeaway from this one is a week is such a long time in rugby league. The Knights were embarrassed last week and beaten easily by the Bulldogs, who they destroyed by a combined margin. A combined 100 points in their 2 games they'd versed the Doggies last year. Meanwhile, the Dolphins had their greatest ever win. They blew the Eels off the park, scoring 9 consecutive tries in their highest ever scoring game in the NRL. 1 week later, the Knights lineup gets weaker. They have to travel to Brisbane, where they haven't won in their past 20 goes, I think it is, against Queensland teams. They only won like a magic round game there against the Dragons. Like, they never win in Queensland against Queensland teams. and they get the upset. And I mean, the Dolphins from last week were nowhere to be seen. And if you guys watched the preview show, you would have known all the stats I've thrown out there as to why I was so keen on the Dolphins and thought minus 5.5 at $1.79 could still be a best bet, although it's 1 cent short of what we look for on this podcast. In terms of a win, no disrespect to Knights fans here, I'm not trying to sound salty. It was probably one of the least impressive on-field wins I've ever seen. But then if you look at it a little bit deeper and you have to consider they had to reshape their game plan without Kalen Ponga, I think if you add that context in, then it actually is quite a remarkable win, despite the Dolphins looking off in this one. The big challenge for the Knights now, given they won't have Kalen Ponga for a long period of time, is how do they replicate this effort into next week when, again, they're going to be facing a desperate side in the Warriors? So a question mark there for the Knights. For the Dolphins, it's just about resetting and finding some consistency across their performances, because that was two entirely different sides from what we saw last week to what we saw this week. Even though, you could argue in Darwin, there was more reasons why you should go the Eels, where in this one, there's more reasons you should go the Dolphins, and vice versa for the Knights. So a really tough loss here. In terms of yourself as a Dolphins fan and myself who loved the Dolphins in this one. How did you see it, though?
Yeah, it really annoyed me even more that the Dolphins were able to do that, what they did in Darwin a week ago, because they were so much sloppier today and looked so less threatening. Today, the Dolphins looked like a team that has 5 of their best players out. Funny that's kind of what I thought they might look like in Darwin. Again, it was such a strange period, that 20 minutes in Darwin, that's seared into my memory and will be for quite a long time. Today, look, Undertaker makes the great point there and you said it wasn't a great win by the Knights. So I take the point there that the Dolphins let Newcastle off the hooks on several occasions. There were some butchered tries, and you need to be better than that. But at the same time, the Dolphins did score 2 in the final 3 minutes, which makes the final score a bit closer. I think the Knights were absolutely deserving. Funnily enough, Izarko's a great kicker, but he rushed both kicks, made neither of them. Obviously, you make both, you tie the game. You make one of them, you've only got to get in 2-point field goal range at the end. It's a little bit different when the Dolphins were still down 4 points and trying to force something to happen and ultimately turned it over. But I thought it was a classic case of injured player theory. Not that I was brave enough to take Newcastle, but they all lifted without Ponga. Like, everybody took on their fair share. I mean, this Armstrong, what a debut. Scores the first try, just so fearless. Attack the game from start to finish. So many great, brave moments and dynamic moments where you could be forgiven for thinking that Ponga's out there. Some of the moves and some of the plays that Armstrong was making. Not that he's a playmaker, but a ball runner, great threat. And I thought everyone in the spine really stood up. Like, Hastings was excellent. Gamble, one of his best games. Brayley as well. And the key position players were the difference in this one. And that's what allowed Newcastle to build that lead, along with, especially first half, flawless execution. Don't think Newcastle had an incomplete set till about the 45th minute. And there was a period where Newcastle then dropped it 3 times in a row and opened the door for the Dolphins, but the Dolphins couldn't capitalize on that. So what can you say? It's a game where the Knights obviously challenged themselves to prove they're not a one-man team, came out, fought really hard, and caught a Dolphins side that is missing key game breakers and were just a little bit off their game. And in this competition, you can't afford to be against anybody. So the Knights get the upset, but it would have upset a lot of tipsters. I'm sure a lot of people tipped Newcastle last week, and they weren't even close against the Dogs. And I'm sure a lot of people tipped Para against the Dolphins last week, and the Dolphins smashed you. So then this week, all those people then clearly tipped the Dolphins, and then the Dolphins lose to Newcastle. So the form is still tough to figure out, especially between these teams that I would say are in the middle of the ladder.
Spot on. It's those middle tier teams that are making it really difficult this year with inconsistent performances. Just reading the comments here from Undertaker and Jeremy, I'm going to put out a prediction that the Warriors will be a best bet of yours next week. And you don't have to don't feel any pressure, don't feel anything like that. But if the Warriors are a best bet, I'll have a smile on my face. Let's move to the final game of the round. Sharks beat the Raiders 40-0 at GIO Stadium. And from a footy perspective, there's not much to break down here. I wouldn't really call this a match even. It was all one-sided. The only really tipping factor the Raiders had coming in this one was it is Ricky Stewart's 500th game coaching, which is a huge milestone. I think only 4 or 5 other coaches have ever done that. And it is Anzac round. And of course, there's a huge defense presence in Canberra. But outside those off-field factors, everything led to the Sharks here. And that's exactly what we got. Dominant in every single area. And as we said last week, they are edging further to genuine contender status. They're playing consistent footy. They've had to do this one without Braden Trindle. And I think that's what will give them the biggest smile, because if you're a Raiders fan, you probably were licking your lips at the Braden Trindle news and saying, well, this is something on field as to why we can tip us the change in the spine. And the Sharks didn't miss a beat without Braden Trindle. They looked just as good. Daniel Atkinson there had a great running game today and really suited playing alongside Nico Hines. So brilliant for the Sharkies. Raiders, huge question marks if they can do anything this year without Jamal Fogarty based on what we saw today. Do you see it that way as well?
That was the biggest issue for the Canberra today going in. You're going to miss Fogarty, but it really didn't come down to that at all. Weeks offers something different in attack, but the issue for Canberra was Cronulla's such a complete side. Cronulla have come out of their bye and just destroyed North Queensland and Canberra in consecutive weeks, leading the competition. They just ask so many questions in attack, but then they're also so relentless in their defense. So Cronulla's a really complete team that I don't know if anyone could have beaten them this weekend with that display. And Canberra's missed way too many tackles. The second try of the game is an easy or simple one-on-one Joe Tapine on Hazelton, 5 meters out of the try line, and he goes for a wrap-up tackle and completely slides off, and Hazelton walks in for a try. That's really danger signs. And from there, it was 12-0 Cronulla. And if there was any glimmer for the Raiders, it was then a length of the field line break where Savage tees up what should have been a walk-in try to Danny Levi, who spills his lollies 10 meters out. In fairness, I think Levi was labouring, and I think you could hear the footsteps of Nico, who may have actually caught him and kind of spilled the ball. But Cronulla scored the very next set. So it was a 12-point swing right there. And Canberra had moments where they were attacking the Sharks line, and you kind of want to believe, because you're like, well, last time these teams played, there was an 18-0 lead one way and then 30 the other way. So something weird could happen, but comebacks always begin with one try. Canberra couldn't even get that one. Every time Canberra got a sniff, the Sharkies were like a brick wall. And when it was down the other end of the field, as I said, it was way too many missed tackles for Canberra, which is highly disappointing. You can't blame missing your halfback for that, especially when you're at home. And Canberra have shown us a bit more this year than kind of what I expected coming into the year, where I suggested they could be spooners. There's some exciting, young players in this team, but I guess that's the problem with you've got so many young guys. When it goes against them, they don't have that experience or maturity to kind of handle adversity, it seems.
I'm just looking at the ladder because I want to get it right here. It must have been the 2018 or 2020 season when the Broncos won the wooden spoon. Do you remember exactly what season?
2020.
2020.
Yep.
And the point I make there is they had a very good team there with lots of young talent. And Payne Haas was putting up the same numbers, etc. But they didn't have the glue to hold them together, which is now Adam Reynolds. As we know, they've now gone on to be a very consistent and great footy side with players like Reynolds and Walsh offering that point of difference in attack. Reynolds allows Walsh to be his best. Well, I think you can almost say where the Raiders are at now is similar to the Broncos in the past. Without Jamal Fogarty to glue those young guns together, Ethan Strange won't be as effective in attack with the pressure of now needing to lead the side around. Chevy Stewart at fullback is another one. Danny Levi didn't have his best game today. And so there are similarities with this Raiders team and teams of the past that have had really great young rosters, but you do need to have that influential key spine figure. Otherwise, it's all worth nothing, in my opinion, at least.
Look, Raiders fans will be happy to hear that. I mean, that Brisbane team, you're right about the talent. That Brisbane team 2020 that came last, they had an emerging Payne Haas, Paddy Carrigan. And Carrigan was asked to captain the team, at times. Brodie Croft was handed captaincy, to talk to the point of lack of leadership. I think, was Darius Boyd the captain for periods there, but like he was well and truly at the end of his career and on the outer. But that team had a day for feeder, and that toxic season was probably part of the reason that he went to your club. Do the Titans have that caliber of talent coming through? I guess it remains to be seen. Like, I still think Tomoko is one of the most explosive outside backs in the comp. And some of these other young kids, like they're putting in, it's very early days to really say like what kind of career is a Chevy Stewart, a Ethan Strange, and even let's say like a Morgan Smithy. So we haven't seen too many games. Like what kind of careers these guys going to have remains to be seen. But they are like the youngest squad on average, right? And then even the guys that are older, I would say, are probably past their prime. So you're lacking, leaders that are in the absolute prime of their career that can, turn a momentum of a game or put a team on their back when they're up against it.
And I would implore anyone after this podcast finishes to Google Broncos NRL 2020 roster. I've got it in front of me here. You will not believe that side won the wooden spoon.
Xavier Coates.
Yeah,
was Cobbo
Tommy
in that team?
Dearden. Cobbo would have
Maybe Cobbo was a year
junior.
away.
Yeah,
Tommy Dearden, that's right. They nearly ruined Tommy Dearden's career that season.
And even even though Cobbo was still a junior at that stage, Isaiah Parisi was there. He's gone on to play for the Wallabies in the last few years, man. It's such a great lineup. I can't believe that side got a spoon. Unfortunate for them there. And hopefully the Saints...
Who was the coach of that team?
Would have been Anthony Seibold.
He could... No one would ever hire him again, would they?
Oh, this man will win a premiership.
That Manly team, I keep going against them, and more often than not, they've got the win. To be fair, they're sitting fifth, and they're one of the teams that I do hear a fair bit of criticism of my evaluations on. And I hear plenty of criticism these days, but nonetheless, I still have confidence, and I feel like, even going into this weekend to come out of it 1-2 is pretty rough. I don't feel like we could have possibly done any worse given the sides that we took. But I'll do my best again to see what we can come up with and to go into round 9 with my most confident plays. Then other people can judge how confident they are in following me.
That's it, mate. It is a long season. With that, we will close the show, and we will see you Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. to preview round 9 and hand out our NRL best bets. Have a great week ahead, guys, and over to you, Winnie, for those beautiful, famous last words.
Have a good Sunday night and Monday, guys, and we will see you next Tuesday. Lego.